All right, I am so excited. This kind of new venture podcast. One of the people, as soon as I decided I was going to do this, who I knew I had to have on, because he's endlessly full of information and endlessly entertaining, is my old coach, my friend Brad Gilbert, the legend Brad Gilbert. How are you, BG?
Good morning. How are you, buddy? And Brooklyn must have done a little bit of artwork there, because normally on Tennis Channel, it looks like you're in the closet or the bathroom. So background setting has massively improved, I see, on the new set.
I appreciate you. Yeah, we had to step it up a little bit after 4 years of basically looking like I was the Blair Witch Project. We had to step it up a little bit. And listen, we're going to get to all things Andre and Murray and your playing career and kind of this magical journey that you're now on with Coco. But I think one of the things that doesn't actually get talked about enough, and it's been written about, you had talked about it in your books before, but it is very weird for someone to start coaching another top player while they're actually active on tour. And do I remember correctly that you were actually ranked higher than Andre when you started coaching him?
Yeah, I was. And in 1994 in Miami, I think I was about 25 in the rankings. Andre had dropped to 30 because he was coming off a wrist surgery and missed 8 months. He really wasn't
That's
a
right.
30 player in the world. And he asked me out to go to dinner, maybe the night before the tournament started, at Fisher Island. First of all, I'd never heard of Fisher Island, and nor did I ever know in Florida that you could put your car on a ferry and go to a restaurant. And then that kind of led on the journey that I didn't realize that they were actually thinking about, me as a coach, nor at that point was I thinking about coaching, because I was still, the tennis player. But I was probably 6 months to a year away from what you've been talking about with Andy Murray or other players, that question that you're going to get asked, what are you going to do next?
Yep.
What is your next move? I was, but I feel like as a player, if once you start to talk about that,
Yep.
the corner is right there.
Yeah.
So I was probably in denial about it, but once your ranking is still okay, you try to not think about it, and
But was it, were you offended at all that Andre kind of realized that the end was near for you and just plainly said it?
Well, he didn't say that, but he did take me to
Imply
the
it.
woodshed in Scottsdale like 2 weeks before, 2-1 in a cold night match, in his first tournament back, which he won. I think it was more about, he was asking me about where he was going in his career. Did he still, or did I feel like there was potential for him to go where he needed to go, which I thought, like, for me, was an obvious question. I said, you've lost to me 4 times, and there's absolutely zero reason you should ever lose to me. And I always felt like there was no reason that he needed to always try to be too good as a player, when 99% of the time when you're gifted, you just need to be better than the dude on the other side of the net. And that gets lost sometimes from players when you feel the need to be too good or beat the entire draw in one match.
Yeah, it's funny because as you're saying that, I had this flashback to last weekend when we were out in Vegas and I was just rapping with Andre, and one of his overriding points about Alcaraz was that he feels like he has to play great to win. And it's funny because he's almost regurgitating what you told him 30 years ago.
He's totally in that situation right now. A little bit like, I'll go way back 40 years ago. I remember 1984. I gave some tickets to friends. They wanted to see McEnroe play at San Francisco. And he went out and won easy. I asked a couple, but how was the match? And they go, it was shitty. And he went 2-1. He didn't do nothing.
Yes. That's perfect. Like Novak is the master of that.
And if Alcaraz doesn't do some incredible slide, he doesn't do something, you feel now, because you've seen it. So he is all of a sudden, besides beating somebody They want to see a show. So that's a tough burden to always have to be. Where a guy like Sinner's game is a little more like a modern Novak or an Andres. It's hard and fast, but it's not as this excitement other than amazing ball striking. But you want to see the roadrunner skills and the defensive skills, the offensive skills from Alcaraz. And so he has to learn to deal with that now.
So I have a question, and I hope I articulate it correctly. I was someone who, the next time I hit topspin on a backhand, will be the first time, right? I had serious things that I had to negotiate around. I think you were the type of player also where you problem solved a certain way. You get a lot of credit for the way you got through matches. You said, in the answer 2 questions ago, that Andre should have never lost to you 4 times. Now, if you were never going to be the best player in the world, do you think the fact that you had to figure out and negotiate ways to win matches, is that what has helped make you one of the best coaches in the world? Do you think if you would have had all of the levers of talent available as a player, that you would be as good of a coach as you've ended up being?
I mean, it's a good, honest question. I'll give you a word that's really important for a lot of levels of tennis players, even the ones that are incredibly gifted. I say manage. You have to learn how to manage yourselves and be honest with yourself. So many players are not honest with what they don't do well.
Mm-hmm.
They overestimate what they don't do well, and they think it's a really good shot. I knew my backhand was just a decent shot, but I never tried to rip it. I might go 6 months before doing it, but yet I wouldn't miss it. And there's a lot of players today that you feel like have like a marginal shot, but yet they're trying to pull trigger on it all the time. So it doesn't equate the numbers that, like, all of a sudden you're trying to rip that shot. It doesn't make any sense. With your backhand, you did a pretty good job of managing it. Probably in retrospect, that maybe if I would have thought about it a little bit, because Andre told me the first time, he goes, why doesn't he have close grip on the two-handed backhand? Because only David Ferrer was one that had that even wider separation for you. But I did feel like you managed the backhand really well. And I think the thing that we probably did the best for you in a short period of time, the first day that I saw you in practice at Queens in 2003, besides the backwards visor and up and the disgusting gel in your hair dripping on your shirt.
That's such an exaggeration.
And you had oil stains on your shirt.
That's such an exaggeration. You're letting time get in the, you're letting the truth get in the way of a good story. Don't let it get in the way of a good story.
And you prefaced by, you were already prepping me that, like, what we were about to do in the grass doesn't count because I suck on grass. And you said that maybe the only person that I could beat on grass was a British wild card. And like instantly in my brain, I said, you serve well, you got a big forehand, and all we have to do is just tweak one thing, is your return of serve. Because remember, then you were standing on the baseline like Andre, but yet you would miss too many returns. I moved you back like 5 feet. Let's make some returns. So with you, it was just a small little tweak that changed how matches started. You make a couple of returns, you steal a break. All of a sudden, by the end of Queens, you were thinking grass isn't so bad.
Yeah, grass ended up being okay for me. And I remember those first couple of days well. It was like a new beginning when I actually had space to operate. So a couple of things I get asked a lot about different coaches I had and what, some did well and what some, what other people, and they ask, what makes Brad so special as a coach? And I said, okay, so there's a tonal awareness and there's an ability to recognize when to deliver the information where his player is ready to receive it, right? So like, I know Andre would want to go on and you guys would have maybe a 4-hour conversation. He could be right off the court and you guys would settle in. I used to walk past you guys in locker rooms and you guys were like fully on one, like going after it. I didn't like doing that at the courts. I wanted to get in and get out. So you would approach dinner and you would say, okay, level with me here for 15 minutes. And you knew that you had my attention. I was calm. I was not in an emotional state. Where does that instinct come from? Is it something that's natural for you, or is it just a general awareness, something you have to think about? How does that manifest in such expertise?
I mean, it's a great question in coaching, and that you and Andre couldn't be further from, the spectrum. Same like with an Andy Murray. Before a match, maybe 15 seconds was all I was going to get with you. And one time, I remember one time you were playing Cyril Saulnier at Indy, and I didn't think the guy could hit a backhand down the line. The guy hit like 10 backhands in a row down the line. You started railing on me. But a couple of times you could be pretty brash before a match, and I wanted you to play a guy's forehand. Every once in a while, I'd tell you to play the backhand. Then you would tell me in the stands, see, you were wrong. It's about, understanding the player. Andre liked to talk a long period of time about matches and afterwards. You needed space, get in, get out. It's very similar to you about information is Coco. Coco, you can't go a long period of time. And she's a little bit like you, the Mission Impossible. This message will implode in 10 seconds. And so you have to understand that. And that's the cool thing about coaching. And I also feel like that I learned a lot from my coach, Tom Shivington, in that I don't have a philosophy. I don't feel like I take a player, and then some coaches feel like, okay, this is the type of player each time I want to mold them into. I'm always thinking about what maybe my player doesn't do that well. How are you going to manage that? And how are you going to maximize what you do well? And probably now, when you watch, I think the most important factor to being great is how do you manage that dip? Like Sampras could be playing awful, and he could be at 4-all. How often have you seen Joker? He's not at his highest level, but he's still on serve. And all of a sudden, if you have a dip, he can bite you in the ass, in 11 minutes. That, to me, is the difference between being good and being great. How do you manage when you're not at your best, and how do you take advantage quickly?
Another thing that you are an absolute expert at is I see so many coaches, right? And I watch them operate, and I hear what they're saying, and they're telling their player 11 different things during a practice, right? It's like your swing arc, your prep, your this, that, the footwork, you got to be at 90-degree angle, and it's like your head's going to explode. You are so good at focusing around 2 or 3 talking points at a time. You go in, there's a focus. You mentioned the first day at Queens, we're going to take a step back. That's going to free you up. And you say it with a confidence where even if I'm on the fence, there's still a belief system. Is that something that's intentional, or do you just feel like you have to kind of tackle one problem before you can actually commit to another one?
I feel like too many coaches in practice get too technical. Yep. I mean, I see it like every day. I'm on the court yesterday, and I'm amazed how many coaches are so technical during practice, and they feel like every swing you did something wrong. And I'm like, man, if you want to find something wrong, you will. But to me, it's not like the time to be doing that. And probably my all-time pet peeve, my coach, Tom Shivington's pet peeve, why do coaches stand so close to the player when he practices? Give him some space. You should be nowhere near the court when they're playing. You should never be standing. Andre would go nuts if the coach was standing behind the player when he's serving. Just give some space, give some freedom. And a lot of times we're on limited time, like at these tournaments. So you're trying to maximize and think about, maybe some of the things that I might be saying is for the match tomorrow. Or maybe, maybe let's work on a couple of crosses here, because maybe we can do that a little bit more tomorrow in the match situation. Because I think there's practice when you're off. That's a time to work on things. That's like you have a little grid or you have a long block getting ready for us. But when you're at the tournament, the tournament's not the time to be getting fit. If you're trying to get fit at the tournament, you're in the shitter. And we shouldn't be trying to make technical changes. Now you're just trying to get ready to have this ability to turn on tomorrow. And then tomorrow, the next day, how am I going to, fix my practice schedule to get ready for the match?
We probably have a lot of listeners who aren't, like, your first coaching gig was with Andre Agassi, right? And then, you pick up with Coco. When we got together, we had a lot of runway to improve on, but I think I was 6th in the world when we started. Do these the way you approach that, and with the technical part of coaching, does that apply to all levels, or is it something that you can do because you're dealing with players of a certain level, like with the rec players and coaches that are, coaching juniors? Is that still the same?
Totally the same, but you were 10, by the way.
I call bullshit on that for 20, by the way. I'll go back and have a research department.
Okay, you ever play backgammon?
No, but I know that I was 6th in the world.
I double the cube and say that you were 10.
You got it.
When I start coaching a player, let's say it's a pro, I try to think about whatever's happened before doesn't matter. And you don't compare one player to the next player. I started thinking, and I start looking through your lens, what can we do to start getting better? And it's only, in tennis, way too many players and coaches think about what we've missed and what's happened in the past. That's not helping you. What's helping you now is getting ready for what's upcoming. And probably, if I'm working with the club player, I start thinking about in the same terms. I feel like club players way more overestimate their weaknesses massively. Coco's physio, Maria, she's 40 years old. She's an Argentinian lady. She was playing a match yesterday, and she lost to another Argentinian physio in 7-6. And I was out there walking in the morning, and I gave her a couple tips. I said, you know what? If you play to your strengths, you beat that guy 6-2. There's no reason with your quickness that you're trying to pull triggers. You should be a pusher. You should, when the ball's high to your backhand, back up. Manage how you're playing. And a lot of club players do not understand. Screaming winner 1 point. It's the dummy errors that cost you the match. And believe me, all the way through the juniors in college, that stuff matters.
I am having fun and a chuckle here of you walking by and analyzing a battle royale of trainer versus trainer. And I had this flashback to when your son, Zach, and Dougie Spreen were in the indoor courts at Wimbledon just having absolute battles. And I'm coaching Doug and you're coaching Zach. We spent a million off days. We would practice. I always like to practice on the carpet because I feel like it was a truer bounce than what you would get at the practice courts, and you wanted to get a little bit of rhythm. And I remember those afternoons where it was like the Zach versus Dougie showdown. We would be at home and be like, they'd kind of look at each other. We're a little bored, like, it's only 5-minute walk. You guys want to go over and battle? And they're like, yeah. And then we would each go. Like Brad's coaching his guy, and I'm coaching Spreedy.
But believe it or not, okay, you play now. You're at a club, and a lot of 3-0s and 3-5s want to be better, and they take lessons. But the simpleness in an actual match isn't about how you're hitting the forehand and how you're hitting the backhand. It's about shot selection. It's about making another ball. And if you're, let's say, a college player and you're a good mover, you're pulling trigger, maybe you don't need to. So it's always trying to find a solution, what will work best for your game. And that's kind of how I thought when I played. And if I was reborn, I never heard this word one time, Andy, which I heard from Andre, which didn't make sense to me because I couldn't compute it. Andre told me early on, this word that's a simple 4-letter word that didn't fucking compute to me. You know what it was? Peak. How am I going to be peaking in 7 weeks? And like me, I couldn't think, well, we got Miami. And he wanted to know, like in Washington, it was about how am I going to be ready for the Open? And so like me, when I played, I was always focused on the week. So maybe I'm
in your camp.
And so maybe when I would get to the Open, I would be tired, you know, because I didn't understand how to do that. Because for me, every week was the Open. And I didn't think about winning a slam or peaking like that. So once he told me about that, it helped my brain understand, okay, it's not about Washington. And since even though I want to be playing well there, I want to be able to play at my best 7 weeks out. So that kind of instantly changed my brain from the player to the coach. And probably the most important transition that you'll make from a player to the coach is understanding it doesn't matter what I did. It only matters when I look through your lens or Andre's, now Coco's. That's what helps make them a better player. But a lot of former players look through their eyes and think about what they would do and then tell the player what they're, how they see it through their own lens.
So you've obviously seen kind of and experienced everything through your own eyes, through your players' eyes. Who do you lean on now? If you have a question about, are you calling Andre and saying, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Who do you rap with about tennis still?
I text you. I text Andre a lot. I talk to Killer Cahill a lot.
Interesting.
And believe it, I still talk to my coach, who is 87 years old, Tom Shivington. And my kids, throughout their whole life, didn't even know his name was Tom. They just think his name is Coach. And I told Coach the only difference was he had to coach people like me. I got a chance to maybe coach a little better players. And when you coach a college team, it probably makes you a little more even keel because you have to learn to manage different levels.
Oh, interesting.
So when you coach different players, they have different levels. But the beauty of tennis, there's all this technology now, which I'm not that crazy about, to tell you the truth. And the lines...
Is that just because you don't know how to work an iPhone?
No, I know how to work it, but not amazing. And, I still have... But I'll tell you this. Okay, when you get 300 pages of analytics, there's some great stuff in there. But there's also I call the analytics doesn't take the human factor into it, that your player maybe strength is different than the patterns of this one match they're going to come up. So all of a sudden I'm looking and I'm scouting a match. The girl is serving and doing everything that maybe tomorrow, when she's playing Coco, she's going to make an adjustment. If she doesn't, you're probably going to thump her. And I find that if I have 300 pages of analytics, doesn't your opponent have 300 pages of analytics? So you have to be careful. If I told you, Andy, it's verbatim. The guy's serving wide your backhand on every break point. He does it 93% of the time. And I feel like football coaches and a lot of tennis coaches hide behind this data. I'd much fucking rather be wrong than say that the data told me it's going to the backhand. Then what happens on the big point? They go to your forehand because they know that your forehand's weaker.
Yeah. So it's like, for example, my mind went to, okay, so if someone's trying to figure out where I'm serving and they're using a small enough sample size and the match that they happen to look at is me playing Feliciano Lopez, and then all of a sudden they draw down that, oh, well, Andy's serving wide 85% of the time. That's not actually like my serving pattern. It's just the serving pattern that I had inside of a given matchup. And you can't make that into gravity, right? You can't make that just factual day to day.
So let's say they'll do it over, 80 matches. 70 of those matches could have been one-sided, and you might have been able to been fine. The matches that are most important are the matches where you're playing at the same level as your peers, and what changes can you make? I know that one time I looked at data a long time ago when Andre played Pete in the 99 final of Wimbledon. He was averaging about 99 miles an hour on his second serve.
And he pumps it up to 120 against Andre immediately.
Yeah. And so he knew Andre was playing really well there, and he was like, you know what? I'm not going to let him take some huge shots. And then all of a sudden, we weren't quite ready for that. And at 3-4, the match turned on a dime, 3-all, love 40, and he hit 2 second serve bombs. And then, and then Andre got rattled because he didn't break. But that's not going to be in the data. And great players probably have the ability to change data more than the guy ranked 80 or a girl ranked 150.
Yeah, and the thing that is true amongst all great players is they generally force you to up your risk profile. Like you're talking about Pete having to go bigger against Andre. I'm not hitting a little bunny kick against Roger because I don't want to get neutral. And so across all of the great players that you've ever seen, I would guess that the easiest kind of common drawdown is that Pete example where he knows Andre is playing. He can, he's not going to be able to manage his serve, right? He has to actually create something special, and vice versa. I always had to adjust against Fed and do things I didn't want, come in on balls I didn't want, try to be aggressive on the backhand when I didn't want to, a little bit more up my risk profile on a second serve. I just think the greats across time, and maybe no one better than Novak, kind of forcing you into kind of upping your risk profile. And when I sit down and watch matches, I always get told what's happening, right? I always get told this person's missing this shot, this person's missing that shot. And I'm going, no, that person's missing that shot because they don't have the choice to play their standard boxed in game, right? You're playing someone 40 versus Novak. Something's got to give. They're not going to beat him with their kind of stock offering, right?
So the greatness of Novak. So Fed's game has all this electricity and he has shots and everything. Same with Rafa.
Yep.
Take Novak. He's the greatest player ever at the neutral ball. It's not sexy. It's effective. And it forces you into making a decision that maybe you don't want, or maybe I'm not willing to play this 20-ball rally. And he wins a lot of points by not taking a risk. He's not hitting the ball inside the service box, but he's hitting a good, hard, quality shot. And I think that's the biggest change that I made with Andre, is that Andre would go too big. Mm-hmm. He would risk too much on the first ball, and then he would litter up a stat sheet. And I'm like, you're not the type of player that should be littering up a stat sheet. I said, if you play a match and you can hit less than 10 unforced errors, nobody's going to beat you.
You're not losing, yeah.
Unless somebody plays a great match. But when you play 40 winners, 40 unforced errors, you know who was an unbelievable player to litter up a stat sheet? He wasn't a fast guy, but that's probably the best way he could play against good players, was Robin Soderling.
Oh, man, he could thump it. Yeah, it's like he was most effective by kind of having peaks and valleys, right?
Enquist, another Swede like that.
Yeah.
So when you're a great ball striker, there's no reason that you need to litter up a stat sheet. At least let the match come to you and see if you need to all of a sudden up what you're doing because your opponent's asking you to do that.